Well, hello once again, and welcome to my channel where I seek to provide to you Oracle-related content for your personal and professional development. And if you like content like this, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel, like our videos, enable notifications so that you stay informed of new content when we release. So today we're going to do something new. We're starting a data guard series. So for data guard, what that typically means is, part of a maximum availability architecture, a solution so that companies that are running on Oracle databases have an opportunity to replicate, a copy of their production databases in real time. So that in the event of something catastrophic, hopefully not, they are able to fail over or switch over to that disaster recovery system. So basically, data guard is just one of those technologies among many that companies use in order to prevent for disaster. So let's go ahead and start this project. If you've been riding along with me on this channel, you certainly are familiar with our PrimServe server. We configured this server several weeks ago. And today we're going to use that server in order to create, a couple of other servers that we would use for our project today. So currently the server is in an off-powered state, and you want to make sure it's in an off-powered state because we want to make a full clone of this server. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on this and make a clone. Now, the reason I am making a clone, I would call this a primary. So I'm trying to create two database servers, a primary database server and a standby database server. So I would refresh, I would generate new MAC addresses. I'm sure you probably have watched a few of my videos where I clone VMs. I usually like generating new MAC address. So I would go ahead and hit next, perform a full clone, and this should take about a minute and we should be done. Now, what I would do is I would perform this full clone and then I would make some configuration changes so that I have a separate server for a primary database. Now, I'm going to clean up that server a little bit. Once that cleanup is done, I would duplicate that server one more time and create a standby database, a standby server. So let's go ahead and wait while we get servers cloned. So when this clone finishes, I would, power on that server and try to make some network changes. So on the left side is what I have assigned, or what IPs I am going to assign to this new server that I am creating right now. So I'm going to go a little faster because this is not the first time we've done cloning on this channel. If you really want to know how to do the cloning, I would put a link to the video that we did with cloning. So I would go ahead and power on this new server. So while that is working, I'll get my mobile XTEM ready to get a session running once that server boots up. So in my sessions, of course, I would use a Prim server. Now, our Prim server has an IP of 192.168.56.101. So I would log in there as the root user and then make some changes to the host name. I'll make some changes to the host name and some password settings. Not password settings, sorry, IP. Let's see if our server started. All right, our server started, so that's good. So let's go ahead and open up our session here. Our Prim server as root. So our Prim server is now open. So usually I like zooming this so that you can see what I am doing. So so in order to change the host name, we would use the nmcli command. So host name ctl, currently it's primserve.local domain. So I would go ahead and use the nmcli general host name and switch it over to primary instead of primserve. All right, so if I run a host name ctl command right now, that has been changed. Now, certainly for my network interfaces, if I run an if config, I currently see my ENP S03, which is kind of my loop, which is kind of what I'm using for my NAT interface. And I'm not going to bother about that one. So what I'm using as my host-only adapter is the ENP S08, and that is what I am going to change. So I would certainly go into my sysconfig network scripts for the one that specifically has settings for ENPS 08. I VI into that, and then I go all the way till the end. I hit I. So I want to give it an IP of 115. So 56115 would be what I would give. I save this. All right, so host name and an IP address has been changed. Now, one more thing I need to change before I get out of this. I want to take a look at my Etsy hosts file. So currently in the Etsy host file, I still have primserve. So that has to change. So I would VI into my Etsy hosts. And then here, I would remove this entry. Not really remove this entry. I'll just go I, and then I make some modifications on it. So delete 15. And this would now, instead of primserve, it would be my primary. Now, I know for sure, and this is me thinking ahead, that when I do clone this server, I would need this server as well to have an entry for the standby server. So what I want to do right now is kind of just give it a label here so that we all understand what I'm talking about. So primary server, and why don't I copy this and then all the way to the end, I give it another couple of spaces, and then I paste, and then I modify this for what is going to be my standby server so that when I clone it, I don't have to worry about working on the Etsy or a Etsy host file anymore. So standby. And of course, the IP is going to be 16. Now, if you're familiar with cloning and changing, you could just fast forward the video to when we actually do start our data guard exercise. So I'll save this. And now that I've saved this, I'm going to reboot this. Init 6 will reboot this, but when we come back, when it reboots, we are not going to be able to log in using the primserve because primserve was 101. So I do have a session already prepared for it. It is going to be 115. So we're going to come back in there as Oracle 115, and then we see how much more we need to do in terms of changes. All right, so we're still restarting. All right, so we restarted. So let's go ahead and call that server up now. If you look over here, you have a primary, it's running. So we'll call that primary up with this 115 because that is the IP address we gave to it. So here we go. So let's do a host name, CTL, just to confirm. So this is our primary server. And again, we do a host name -I. So we add 115. And then we, of course, we cut the contents of our Etsy hosts. So it's looking good so far. So the other thing too, and again, if you're familiar with this step, you can fast forward to when we start the data guard configurations. I do have in this database, on this server, Etsy or a tab. If you've been following the previous exercises we've been doing on this channel, the test 1 and test 2 are the two databases that we upgraded using the auto upgrade tool. And our PrimDB was the original of our databases that we configured when we created the server. So I would go ahead and do some cleanup. Now, the reason I'm doing cleanup, if you see my df-h, and if you're writing along with me, you might also have this issue. If I run a df-h on my mount point, on my root mount point, I only have 5.5 gig available. Now, I want to clean this up because certainly I would need some more space, to recycle the space a little bit. So each of these databases would take about 8 gigs. So if I clear up the 2, I am down to 16. So, and then one of the other things too, that if you've been riding along with me, CDU01 stage. Remember, stage was one of the locations we used. We are no longer gonna need this stage location. So, and it's using a lot of space. So du -sh, if we want to see how much stage is using 9.7 gigs. So I'm going to drop everything that's in stage, remove -rf. And again, if you are not familiar with using the remove command on Linux, I want you to be very careful. This is not reversible for the most part. All right, so df-h to check on my space. Again, now I'm up to 16, but like I said, I want to delete the test 1, test 2 databases, probably the prim database. I would delete the prim database, create a new database called prod, and then we would take on our exercise from here. So tst1, let's do ss. Okay, so ss doesn't work. So let's do something real quick here. So I would vi into my .bash profile, and then I would add an entry in my .bash profile. So let's do this to the end and call it alias. So ss, and that alias I would give it to SQL Plus as sysdba, SQL Plus as sysdba. Yeah. Okay, let's save that and then execute that .bash profile and then .bash profile, execute that. And then when I do ss now, it should take me, it's a shortcut for SQL Plus as sysdba. So let's run a startup on that test 1 database. So when I'm done with deleting the test 1 database, I would pause the video in the interest of time. That way, I can go back and delete test 2 and PrimDB. That way, we're not doing the same thing and making this video a little too long. So this has been started. LS, our listener may not start because, of course, let's do a net manager first. Our listener may not start because since we duplicated, the listener entries might still have prim serve. and it's not going to start if the host is not right. So let's go to our net manager here and fix that real quick, because I need to deregister this dynamically from the listeners when I start them. So if I look at the listening location here, it's PrimServe. Like I said, I would change it to primary.local domain. That's where we are. So, let's cancel this. Let's look at the service naming, TST1. That's it. So primary. Let's do this. And in this step really doesn't, but I just want things to, to finish up in a clean manner. So primdb as well should have that issue, primary. So let's close and save. So right now I'm going to run dbca to delete that database. You can run dbca to configure a database. You can run dbca as well to delete a database. But you want to make sure that your database is in at least a mount state. That way, it is able to access the data files and the redo logs and all of that stuff. So delete database, test one. I'll provide sys password, which is Oracle. Next. And again, I will pause the video, and then I'll repeat the same steps for test two. When we come back, I would have deleted test two and primdb as well. Okay, so we are not going to, we did not create Enterprise Manager Cloud Control, so we're not going to deregister it from that. So let's hit finish, and that should go pretty quickly. So I would pause the video for you guys, and then I'll resume the video after deleting all the other databases. Okay, so I think we successfully deleted all those 3 databases. So let's go ahead and do a CAD on our Etsy. All right, tab. There shouldn't be anything here. So my df-h should give me a better picture. Right now, my root mount point now I have available 27 gigs. So that is pretty fantastic. So what I'm going to do right now is my environmental variables are still set. If I ask which DBCA, there is DBCA running from our 19 home. So I'm going to create a new database called prod, which I would use. All right, I'll create a new database called prod. I would use the advanced configuration, single instance, general purpose transaction, general purpose or transaction processing. This is an OLTP database. For the name, I would give it prod. I would not create as a container. So let's go ahead. I like using OMF, so I'm going to pick that option. And so when we did take a look here, 50, let's do that. So, all right. So let's go back to our template. I would let it use OMF. I would certainly enable flash recovery area for backups. And I'll just give it 10 gig. I'll just give it 10 gig. Enable archiving. Let's do that. Otherwise, we will have to enable it. As part of the process, we have to enable archive log mode. Now, let me do this so that, again, I go through one more time real quick. If you haven't enabled archive log mode, what you can do to do that. So it's initializing the listeners at this point. And I certainly hope the listener is up and running. We can check that here. Let me go duplicate this session. And because I don't have a database to source an environment, I will have to source those manually. So Oracle home equals U01 app, Oracle product 19.0.0 db home _1. And then I export path variable to Oracle home bin location, and then of course the path variable, and I append the Oracle home bin location to it. So which lsnrctl, so that's good. So lsnrctl, let's do the status of the listing. Oh, it's actually up and running. That's good. So okay, good. So let's see how this works. All right, so we have our 19C listener normally running from 1521 from our 19C home, and then we would go ahead and choose that. So we would choose that listener, and then this is going to create a database. So once the creation starts again, of course, we'll jump over to its completion and continue our journey on DataGAT configuration. So memory, I like using shared. I'll leave it at its default. Sizing, typically, I like using 500. Character sets, I would not change. Connection mode, dedicated. Let's leave it at that. And let's add sample schemas. Why not? Let's just have something so that we can make some changes and see how those changes are replicating on our DataGAT as well. Enterprise manager, we will not do that. So same password for all administrative users, Oracle. Let's go ahead and create a database. All right, so finish. So details, we can see the progress of what's happening. And this should take a few minutes. So I'll pause the video and then of course resume after the database has been created successfully. All right, so our database configured successfully. So here is one thing I should have done. It probably would have been a smarter thing to do. I would have cloned the VM before actually installing the prod. But at this point, since we're already at this point, what we are going to do right now is we are going to shut down this. Oracle cannot shut down, so I'm going to switch over to root. And then I would shut down init 0. And the reason I'm shutting down is I got to shut down and then I clone this VM. And then we are going to start making some changes to that VM. So it is powered off at this point. Let's go ahead and clone this. Again, we're going to clone it and call it standby. We're going to reset the MAC addresses for all network adapters. And it's going to be a full clone. So this is going to take about a minute. Yeah, we're almost done with the cloning, and the cloning is done. So I would go ahead and open up the standby server. And we are going to change the host name, and we're going to change the IP address. I'm sure by now you're already familiar with that process. All right, so host name CLI and MCLI. So this would be for the physical standby. Let's copy that. All right, here we go. I'm going to go in as root. Usually on the list, it doesn't state who root is. I will go not listed and hit root, and then Oracle. I like logging in using MobileXtem, but I would keep it simple. I'll just log in directly on the console. right here. Logged in as a privileged user, I would right click or I would go to applications and under favorites. Under favorites, I would see, I should be able to see my terminal here. So what happened here? All right, I'll just right click here and open up a terminal. All right, so our host name, C still, so primary. I would paste the host name and I'm changing it to standby. So NMCLI host name standby. And then I want to VI into my etc sysconfig network scripts if config enp 8. So you want to make sure it's the 8 interface you're changing and you're changing that to 16. So I would go with I over here, and on the IP address, I would do a 6. I saved that. Now remember, we had already done some work on our etc hosts file, so we don't need to do anything about it. So at this point, I would just reboot this server and then start its own session with 16. So let's reboot this. Let's reboot this server. I'm thinking maybe if I should. So let's exit out of this one. I'm gonna switch the user here. I would switch the user here. Sorry, I would switch the user, log in as Oracle, and then I would drop that database. Again, I'm a little uncoordinated. This wasn't the initial plan. The initial plan was to duplicate before I create a prod database. So let's go ahead and go back in as Oracle. Had the console here. Let's see, sometimes, let's open up a terminal. If this is the first time that would happen. So let's get started here. So .aura env. How do we know there is? So if we cut the contents of our etc or a tab file, we should see our prod database. So the entry for our prod database, so .aura env prod SQL plus as sys DBA. All right, so let's start up that instance. And we want to start it up and of course delete it. So all right, exit DBCA. All right, so let's delete the database. Hopefully this shouldn't take too long. Prod instance Oracle. I think I should have the listener on so that it deregisters it with that listener as well. Let's open up another terminal. I would set my environment.aura env prod lsnrctl start listener. Let's start the listener so that it kind of deregisters it dynamically. All right, deregister. Let's keep going. All right, let's finish that. Yes, data files will be destroyed. I agree. Let's go ahead and clean that up. All right. All right, so database deletion has been completed. So let's close all of this out. I would sudo to root and then I restart this. Sudo to root and then Oracle with the password init 6. I would restart this And at the same time, I want to start off, since we already have this network settings done, I want to start the primary server as well. So when these two get started, then we start the configuration for our primary server. Okay, this one. Usually, so let's do this. I like to see them like this. That way I know the standby server is already on. All right, so both of them are already on actually. All right, so let's go back to, let's close out of this to get a clean session. So primary server, the IP address for our primary server is 115. The IP address for our standby server is 116. So we are going to open two sessions here, one for the primary and 116 for the standby. So you can tell here 116, this is the IP address 5616, primary 115. So I think from a configuration standpoint, IP standpoint, server setup standpoint, we are ready to go. But now from a database standpoint, we have our prot db etc or tab, and I use this command a lot just so that you guys can get, get it on lockdown as second nature, so that you know exactly what databases have been configured on that server. All right, env prod and then SQL. Remember, I did the alias, so SS would get me into SQL plus a 6dba, and let's start up this instance. We are going to make some configuration changes here. All right, let's start off with the database. Now with DataGuard, there are some requirements. You cannot run data, you cannot be running a DataGuard when your database is in no archive log mode. A primary server when your database is in no archive log mode. So the first thing is, let's check our archive log list. All right, so we are in no archive log mode. And again, there is a video I made on how to switch from no archive log mode to archive log mode. I would put that in the comment as well. But I would shut down immediate. It has to be a graceful shutdown. Okay. After my graceful shutdown, I'm going to start up in mount mode. And while I am in the mount mode, then I would switch my log mode to archive log mode. Okay, so it shut down completely. So I would start up mount. So start up mount, and then certainly I would alter my database archive log. All right, database altered. So if I check my archive log list at this point, it tells me now that I am running an archive log mode. So that's good. So alter my database, open. So I should be there. Now, not only do we have to run in archive log mode, but we want to make sure that there is force logging enabled. Force logging, so that every transaction that gets written into this database is logged forcefully, and that transaction will also be replicated on the standby side. So select force logging from $data database. Let's see if that is enabled. Of course, it's not enabled. So we are going to alter database force. We are going to alter database force logging. So we're going to force logging. So database force logging. So if we check again our first login from $V database, now we should see yes. Now, we also want to enable flashback database. So select our flashback on from $V database. Let's check that flashback is not turned on at this time. So alter database, enable flashback on. And if you do this and you're trying to come back, I typically just use the control shift, and then I shift U, control U, just clears up everything. So alter database, what was I doing? Flashback on. Oh, I made a mistake again. Okay, flashback on. Let's do that. Okay, so flashback on. So let's see what our recovery area has been set to. So show parameter recovery. I have it at 10 gig. Let's leave it at 10 gig for now until it complains. If it doesn't complain, I should, be good. And then I want to see, gather some information about the location of my redo logs. So for this, I would copy this command. I want to see the sizes of my redo logs. Now, the reason I want to see the sizes of my redo logs is because I want to create standby logs and allocate the same size that I have on my redo logs. So currently my redo logs are 20. All right. Sorry, 200, not 20. So let's see this thread from $V thread, and this command just gives me thread 1 is for prod. So I would create 3 standby logs with the same size. So let's do this. I put them up all on thread 1. So alter database, add standby log file. So I would do that. It adds it. Now in SQL, if you use the /, it repeats the same command that you ran earlier on. So I'll do that 3 times so that I would see my redo logs. Now, after doing that, I certainly, of course, want to select and make sure that I see, my standby logs if they have been created. So, and one other thing I need to mention also is if you're not using Oracle managed files, you would actually have to pass this, you have to be specific about the location of the standby logs as you create them. So your alter database add standby log file, you would need to put the location to which that file has to be created and the file name, of course. So our online redo logs, our standby redo logs have been created. So, so that is looking good. So let's check some parameters here. So because this, of course, is SQL, the output is not going to be good. So I'll have to format the column. So let's copy the formats and put there. And then now I will run the statement. So that gives me some parameters. Now there are 3 things I'm looking for in this command, right? I'm selecting a name, a value from the $V parameter. This is a view that has information about all the parameters that have been set on the database. I'm looking for the DB name, I'm looking for the DB unique name, and I'm looking for standby file management. And why is this important? In data guide, you are replicating the same database, right? You're creating a standby database of a particular database. Assuming it's your production database, you're creating a standby of that database. The database names have to be the same. Now, what's going to be different is the DB unique names. So if your DB unique name, in our case, our DB name is prod, our unique name is prod. For our standby database, it is going to have a DB name of prod, but a unique name of standby. Okay, so I want that. That is why I'm looking for this year, and we would see how that gets done as we continue further. So, and our standby file management, it's set to manual right now. We want this at auto. So we are going to alter our system set standby. I just kind of like copying and pasting. Management equals auto scope. I mean, it's a dynamic parameter, but I'll just scope it both, so that when I bounce my database, then it should take effect. Now, I'm going to minimize this right now because these parameters are data guard specific parameters that I want us to look at. All right, so for data guard, one of the important things is our log archive config, right? We have to set this data guard specific parameters. So we are configuring a data guard for both prod and standby. That is our data guard pair. All right, so let's go ahead and hit that scope. And I'm going to clear the screen here so it comes up a little bit. And I'm going to set a location for log archive dest1. Now, this is simply just going to use what we are using currently for our current recovery destination. So it's going to use the location that we set aside for our flash recovery area. Log archive dest2, we are specifying that we want to define log archive dest2 to be for the standby service, async. Now, when we are going to talk a little bit more about the protection modes that a data guard uses, that is when we would understand the clarity or the difference between sync and async. That is just kind of a log transport thing. And again, we'll talk about this as we talk about data guard protection modes, max performance, max availability, and all of that stuff. So we are setting a log archive dest2 for our standby service. Now, I was reading while I was getting ready for this that initially in the previous 11 and 12 and 18, actually, we actually used to configure the file client and the file server. Now, what is file? File is fetch archive log server. So in the event that this service is going to fetch archive logs, what server, what database is it going to use as the server? So it has to be the opposite. In our primary database, it has to be alter system set file file server equals standby. So it has to be the opposite. For the primary, it has to be the standby. The standby has to be primaries because each of them have opposing roles at any point in time. So let's scope this to both. I know it's a dynamic parameter, but we just get in the habit of scoping to both. And then when we are done with all of these settings, we are going to restart our database to make sure that everything is looking good. All right, so we set our file server. Let's alter database. I think we already set flashback on, if I remember. So select flashback on from the $database. I think we already set flashback on. Okay, yes, it's on already. So I'm not sure this is just being redundant here. Redundancy in Oracle is a nice thing, though. All right, so now that we have those major parameters set, we certainly can take a look at it. Now I have a nice little command here. Let's see if I run it in SQL and see if it's going to give me output that I can read. Let's see here. Its output is a little bad, but it just kind of summarizes a little bit what these parameters that we've set are. All right, one more thing I wanted to set, the log archive format. I wanted to set that log archive format. If you noticed, a lot of so show parameter log archive format. Now, for me, it really doesn't matter, but I have seen a lot of documentation where they try to like this being .arc. I'll leave it the way it is right now as its default. For me, it doesn't really make any difference. All right, so one other thing too, because we are talking about duplicating a database, on the standby server, we would need to have a copy of the password file of this our production database. So let's take a look at where the password file is located. Usually it is within our DBS folder. So let's cd into our Oracle home. Let's go $Oracle home. Let's go Oracle home, and then let's cd into our DBS folder, S-L. So we have our Aura password here. So this is our Aura password file for our production database. We are going to copy this over to the standby server and also make some changes to our network configuration. That way, these servers are able to talk to each other, and then we continue our configuration from there. So at this point, we also want to take a look at, let's do PWD here. Let's look at our network configurations here. So our network configuration at TNS admin location is our Oracle home network admin. And then let's see the files we have here. We have our TNS and our listener are what we are going to be making changes to. So let's VI into our TNS names. We have an entry already for our prod database. Now, because we want to be able to resolve the name of the standby database on this server, we need an entry for the standby database. So I would go ahead, because we already have this entry for prod, I would go ahead and key in an entry for our standby database. So I would right click, copy this. And the other thing that you can do as well is, since you don't have this prepared, you can copy this. Actually, let me go insert mode, enter, and then I paste. All right, but now you have to make sure that you make the changes. Now, I like copying and pasting each time I'm dealing with TNS listeners, because if you have noticed, these files are a little bit on the strict side when it comes to formatting. So, so I would change this to standby, STBY. Now, well, standby server is not primary, so you want to make sure that you change this also to show the location of the standby database. In the beginning of this video, we deleted TST2 and TST1. So I don't have use for these entries. I'm going to delete them. Prime DB, I already deleted that. The only thing I am going to leave here is this listener prod, because when we look at the production database, our prod database, and we are going to look at the local listener, it is going to point you to listener prod. And that entry for listener prod is why this is important. So we would leave that entry alone. All right. Now that that has been done, I want to make sure that all these changes I've made on, because I had to scope some to both, right? I had to scope to both SP file and P file. An SP file, and of course, running in memory. So right now, let's just make the changes. Let's go back to our database, and then we shut down immediate. We shut down immediate. When it shuts down, then we restart our database. And I think at that point, we can move over to our standby server and make some changes and prepare for duplication. Okay, shutdown completed. All right, let's see here. So let's go ahead and start up our database. Now, while this is starting up, we can go over to our standby server, our 116, our fiscal standby server, and then we start making some changes. Now, remember, the TNS names.aura file on the primary is supposed to have the same entries on the standby. So I would first of all cd to the location of that Oracle product 19 network admin, and then ls minus l. Certainly, I do have a listener.ora file. I do have tnsnames.ora file. Let's see what this tnsnames.ora file has. So currently, it has the tst2 and all of that stuff. But this is primserv. So just to make things nice and clean, I would remove this file. You can either remove it completely or you can rename it. You can move it to TNS names, remove TNS names to TNS names .old, right? You can do whatever you want. Just renaming it, of course, just keeps a copy. It doesn't make it useful, but it keeps a copy. I mean, you can go back there for reference. But what I choose to do is I like doing things clean. So I'm going to remove -f, the tnsnames.ora file. Now, this is in my network location. Now, what I would do from the primary side, let's exit out of this, is that ls-l, we have a TNS names in here. Let's clear this here so that we see. So ls-l. So let's clear that. So I want to use an scp command, and I would copy that file over to the other side. So what I would do here is TNS names, TNS names, ls-l. So scp TNS names.ora, and I want to connect as Oracle at standby, and I want to put it in that location right here. So this location, and that's all I need. So Oracle at standby, and then I put it in that location. So yes, this is the first time. So it's going to ask me for a fingerprint. Let's do that, and then that works. Let's double check if it got there. So this is our location here. Let's do ls-ltr, and voila, we have a TNS names here. So if I cut the contents of this TNS names, we have a copy of this file over on this side. And if you've been rolling with me, you know I like using SFTP a lot more than SCP, but sometimes it's good for us to mix it up so that we kind of know exactly some other things. So now I want to copy also the password file. So let's pwd here. And the password file is in our DBS, our Oracle home /DBS folder. Let's see that. Let's cd to that location first. ls-l Aura password star. So this is our Aura password file. So what I would do, same thing, is scp Aura password file. Let's do Oracle at standby up to the DB. So that, and then DBS, and then Aura password prod. But now I would change the name of that to Aura password of our standby database. This is an important step, because if you get this wrong, you're not going to be able to connect between the databases. So let's go ahead and do that. So it says it's copied. Now let's come to this location. Of course, we want to cd to our Oracle home. Cd space to our Oracle home, cd to DBS folder. Let's clear this so that we bring it up to the top, and then we ls-l. So we have our Aura password for our standby database. So that has been done. The other thing is we want to create an initialization file, initialization parameter file. And the init file is only going to have one entry, the entry for the DB name. So let's VI into our standby. We create an init standby, because of course the format of the init.ora file is the init, the name of the seed, and then .ora. So init standby.ora. We VI into that, And the only entry we have is db underscore name. db underscore name equals prod. That's all we need. That's all we need in here. Let's save that. And then let's cut the contents of our init standby file so that we have init db name equals prod. Remember, the db names are the same. The db unique names are what is going to be different. All right. So password file has been copied. TNS names has been copied. Let's edit the listener on the standby and add a static entry. The static registration would be what would be required. Again, like I mentioned, all of this is important to prepare for duplication. All right, so PWD here. I want to CD to the network location to my listener.aura file. And my TNS location, of course, is network admin. And then, of course, I VI into the listener file. So I do have, well, two listeners here. There is a listener for listener 12. And, you know, quite frankly, I am not going to use this one. I can just go ahead and delete it. I'm not going to use that one. So let's switch to insert mode, delete that. The only listener that I want to use for this project would be the regular listener, the listener itself. And if you notice the host here, because we cloned this server from the primary, it has to be standby. Now we want to make sure that we add a static listener entry, a seed list. Now, if you add a static entry to the listener, there's something I need to show you guys on the TNS names now that I remember. So on the seed list, we are going to copy this and add an entry for our standby. And add our entry for our standby. Let's look at this down here. I like adding it to the bottom. Let's look at our seed list, standby. Our Oracle home looks the same. Our global database name looks the same. And I am happy with the way that looks. I would want to go ahead and just double check. I just want to double check on something. Let's do the TNS names. Let's double check on the TNS names. It says listener prod here. There are some things here that we need to work on. So let's VI into our TNS names. And if you notice, we have to change this to the listener standby and make sure that the listener standby, listener S, oh, I didn't switch to insert mode. Let's exit out of this and come back in. VI TNS names. All right, let's insert now. Let's do STBY. No, let's do that in STBY. Actually, I'm just going to remove this entry. This entry, I'm going to remove it from now because I think it's going to start conflicting with what I have set up in the static listener. So let's leave this one for now, right here. Standby primary. You know what? I'm not going to change anything. I'm not going to change anything. So let's go Q. Let's just leave it the way it is. All right. So let's stop and start our listener one more time. Which LSNRCTL? Okay, there is no LSNRCTL. Let's clear our screen, and then I will set environmental variables. So let's export. Where's my Oracle home? I just want to have a copy of that somewhere. So let's export Oracle home equals that. Let's export path equals $Oracle home / bin, and then the path variable. All right, then LSNRCTL. Let's what the status is. It's not up and running. So let's start it then. Let's start. We'll start and then we test connectivities, okay? We want to start and then we'll test connectivity and make sure that things are looking good. From here, I would TNS ping prod. There's no listener up running on this side. Let's make sure that we have our listener running. Let's set the environment, it's easy. LSNR, CTL, start listener. Okay, good. So our listener is up and running. So let's go ahead and TNS ping prod. Prod pings successfully. Let's clear this so it goes up. Let's TNS ping prod again. And then TNS ping standby, STBY. So that pings, of course, properly. We should be able to do that also on this side. Let's clear. TNS ping prod. That should work. TNS ping standby. All right, that should work as well. So one last step before we move into the duplication phase is there are some dependent folders that you need. Most especially is the admin ADOM folder. We need to make that directory on the standby database. If we don't do this, there is not going to be a location for our man to write audit logs, and your duplication is going to fail. So now that that has been done, let's go ahead and set our environmental variables, and then we proceed with a few more checks, and then we execute our duplication. So standby, copy. All right, now let's go ahead and go into SQL Plus. Now, let's exit out of this. So remember we created CD, what's our location? This is our network admin. So let's CD -//DBS, and then ls -l in this location. Remember we created an initialization parameter file with just the DB name. We are going to use that initialization parameter file to start our standby instance. It is not a database at this point. We're just starting up the instance so that we know Arman has an instance to connect to. So let's go back into our SQL Plus assist DBA, and we are going to start up no mount and specify the P file. So our P file is in this location, the DBS location. Let me use sticks here to make sure that it considers that as a string. DBS, and our init file is that. So let's close the string and let's start up in no mount. All right, our instance has been started. So let's exit out of this. I mean, before we exit out of this, well, let's exit out of this first of all. I want us to try some things, right? Let's SQL plus no log. Let's go into SQL with no login. And I want us to try and make sure that our connections as sysdba are able to work. So we're connecting sys Oracle at standby as sysdba. That should work, all right? And we can connect using that connection string to prod, sysdba prod. That should work as well. So we are good for now. So all our connections are working. So let's go into Arman and duplicate our database. Now, you can go Arman, or you can just, type the Arman connection string for both the target and the auxiliary databases on the same line. It makes things a little easier and straightforward. So we would connect Arman to a target, which is prod, and then the auxiliary, which is standby. So let's go ahead and do that. So prod is up, auxiliary is not mounted. Fair enough, we are in startup mode. So, all right, select instance, and this is for our prod database, status from the $instance. So this one is open. You want to make sure that this is open. All right. So I have a run block, and I want to just copy this and paste. And if you are looking at this and thinking I might be going a little too fast for you, you can pause the video. I can open this up. You can pause the video and take a look at the command. So I'm going rman target. I'm using a run block. Now, a run block is you have a multiple of commands within that block that you want rman to run in that sequence. So the first one is we are running duplicate target database for standby from active database, right? From active database. Now, if you are duplicating from an active database, you can use SP file. But if you're duplicating from backups, it's going to be a little tricky. So, and these commands are a little sensitive in a way that if you put the commands in some places that, you know, Ironman gets very sensitive. Your duplication might fail if you put the wrong thing. Now, one of the things that I, in my experience, have come across when duplicating, if the two servers have the same file architecture, so you have the same U01 app Oracle that, and there are two separate servers, usually I find a lot more success using the no file name check. Sometimes you might have a DB log file convert parameters. You might have database, a file create, DB file create convert parameters. And sometimes it gets a little tricky. So if you're following this demo, this is what will work for this demo. But you want to make sure that you understand your circumstance. What is it exactly you're doing? Sometimes those parameters will have to be set at the SP file level, at the instance level, and then it picks it up, of course, as it starts running. But you want to make sure that you do understand why you are putting a command, why you choose to put one over the other one. So we are going to set the DB unique name to standby, and we're going to add a comment is standby. You're going to see that when the script is running. We're going to set our log archive destination equals the service for this. Now, we had set this earlier on. We are going to set our audit file destination. Remember, we created this location. We're going to set our control files. We're going to set our false server for the standby database. We're going to set our false server to prod. Prod is, a primary database. So the false servers are the opposites, right? Like I said, they have conflicting roles. So if I am the standby server, where do I go fetch my archive? Where do I go fetch archive logs? I go fetch them from prod, right? If I'm in prod and we've done a switch over, if I'm on that side as on prod, I go fetch archive logs from standby server. So when there's been that role switch, and again, we're going to perform some examples, not in this video, but in subsequent videos on some things we can do, of course, with data guide. So for me, this is the command that works. So I would go back here. Let me go back to this. And then I would run this command in RMind. I just right click and paste. I'm not going to eliminate anything. I'm not going to do anything. Everything is within this block. So I'm going to hit enter. So let's wait. If everything goes well, we should be able to see the progress of our duplication. All right, guys. So duplication is finished. So I think this is where it gets exciting, right? Let's try and see. Let's go back to our database and see if effectively we succeeded in creating a standby database. So we exit out of RMind. And first of all, if you view your Etsy or a tab file now, there isn't an entry in here. That's kind of odd. But we can go into a SQL plus a sysdba, and then this is the standby database. And then we can maybe now see, you know, select database role. We can start running some scripts just to see, you know. So it's a physical standby that we have created, right? There was this command that I ran earlier on just to see some parameters, the DB name, DB unique name. Let's go back to where are they? So it's right here. I'm just going to go back here and do this. And I'm going to copy all of this and run. So let's take a look here. So remember I said the unique name was going to change to standby. The database name is going to be the same for both of them. But the unique name for our standby database is standby. Now, I think the interesting part here is let's take a look at our managed recovery process and then see how things are going here. So let's make this a little smaller. At this point, I think it shouldn't be so bad. No, I'm going to do this. Let's do that. All right, let's do this one here. There we go. All right. All right. I think at this point, we can manage this like this. So copy, see if I can make this might be a touch bigger here so that way we see what we're doing. So we are selecting name, database role, open mode, protection mode from our $V database. So right now, our database name is prod, our protection mode is maximum performance, and definitely our role is physical standby, and it's open in a mounted state. Now, let's take a look at the standby logs on the standby side. This really looks ugly, but again, we would let's see here, select let's just select member from $V log file just to make the view a little bit. Select member from $V log file. Let's just take a look at that. So yes, we have six logs. Now let's check on the, you know, managed recovery process. Now, one thing about, so if you want to know that logs are being applied, of course, then the managed recovery process is going to be running. For now, we don't have anyone running, so we can check that right now. First of all, if we take a look at this, we don't have any MRP process running. But once we start managed recovery, that MRP process is going to kick on, and then we're going to start seeing, you know, that process is going to start running. Now, when I do this, typically, I like to open up a session in my POTI here somewhere, or maybe another mobile XTEM session. Let's see here. Let's open up, see if I can open up another mobile XTEM version here, session here. Let's just do POTI. I want to do Oracle at 192.168.56.116. That's where I'm going, 116. So Oracle. All right, so this is really small. So I'm sure for people who have eyes like me, they're not gonna like that very much. So let's do 12, let's do bold, and let's do okay. Apply that. So it's a lot much better. So what I like doing on this side is I like looking at the alert log. So CD U01 app Oracle, it's in the diag location RDBMS, and that would be a standby trace. Okay, and then we tail -F the alert log. So all right, So recovery of online reduced log thread, that's good. So now let's see how this is working for us, right? Let's see how this is working for us. Let's take a look at status of applied logs. All right, so 9 and 10. If we come back here and we go archive log list, let's see where we are. It's 11. Oldest online log sequence 9, so next log sequence is 11. So what we would do is we would perform some alter switches, or we would switch some log files, and then we see how things are going. So what am I doing? Oh, from, there should not be comma over there. Let's see here. Okay, good. So this says applying log. This is some of the things we like to see. So let's go back over to the primary side. Let's switch some log files. So we saw what the log sequence is. Let's switch some log files. Let's switch some log files. And then let's archive log list over here. And at the same time, I kind of like peeping at what's happening over on this side. All right, so right here, let's take a look and see. We cannot do that here. Let's take a look at seeing what sequences have been applied here. So if you see here, it says 9 and 10 have been applied, 9 and 10 have been applied, and 11 and 12 are in memory. So clearly, our standby database is doing what we need for it to do. And we see the progress, right? Recovery log merger is, before it was on sequence 11 and applying the log. Right now it's on sequence 13 and applying the log. So there you have it. We finally have come to the end of the DataGuard standby configuration. Now, I would like to add a little bit more to this video in terms of how we can make our lives easier when we are managing our standby databases. There is something called the DataGuard broker. The DataGuard broker, if that is activated, if that is enabled, will help you manage, manage recovery and some things by itself. So DataGuard broker is kind of between your primary database and your standby database, and kind of really manages that whole archive log shipping process. So for us to be able to do that, first of all, on both databases, we would kind of, and again, I mean, because we have all of this done right now for our primary database, before we set up our DataGuard broker, I want us to maybe cancel manage recovery, enable flashback on our standby database, and then we can go ahead and alter. So it's alter database recover managed standby database cancel. So let's cancel. Let's cancel manage recovery, and let's alter our database enable flashback. All right, and then maybe we can restart managed recovery here. Let's do that. So in order to enable DataGuard broker, like I mentioned, we have to make sure that there is a property parameter DataGuard broker start. We want to make sure that, so let's show the property here, show parameter DataGuard broker start. It's false currently. So let's clear this. Let's do host clear, and let's get back our screen up here. So for the primary and for the standby, we are going to do that. So let's host clear, show parameter DataGuard broker start. It's false. So we want to make sure that we set this to true on the primary side. And then we set this to true. on the standby side. All right, good. So now that it has been set to true, now from the primary side, we're going to log into, because if you're using DataGuard Broker, the DataGuard Broker utility is called DGMGRL, the DataGuard Manager command line. So let's exit out of this. And then we go into DGMGRL, DGMGRL. So once we connect into that, now we are not connected as a user. So you can connect sys, Oracle, and we are connected into sys DataGuard as sys DBA, or we can intent specify as sys DG, right? Remember when we were installing a database, when we installed that YUM utility, it kind of pre-loaded some groups and some users and groups, and DataGuard DBA was one of the groups, right? So and of course Oracle was configured as part of that. So so we don't have any configuration yet. So if I do a show configuration, there's going to be nothing. So the Oracle DataGuard Broker configuration does not exist. It doesn't have any. So we have to create one. And again, with the create configuration, you can call it whatever you want to call it. Now, if you're working within an enterprise, they have the naming conventions. They might choose to do whatever it is. But here, just for the sake of simplicity, I'm calling it prod standby DataGuard as my configuration. You can call it whatever you want. So and the command is I create a configuration, prod standby DataGuard configuration, and as primary prod identified by prod. So that is how we would start that. So right now it has created a configuration. So if I show configuration, it tells me here that there is a primary database. The configuration is this, but the configuration has not yet been enabled. So the status still remains disabled. I'm not done with, what I need to add for this configuration. Now, I would add a standby database because, of course, I created a configuration with the primary. I would add a standby database. So I would add a database standby as the connect identifier, standby maintain as physical. So let's do that. Okay. So it tells us here that member has a log archive parameter with service attribute set. Initially, this is an error that I anticipated, and of course, there is a solution to it. So let me get out of DataGuard DGMGRL, and then I go into my SQL Plus, and then the problem is with the log file dest2 parameter. So I would show this parameter, and there is something, and I would cancel that configuration for the log archive dest2 parameter. And I would do that for both my physical standby as well. So I would cancel this this configuration. So I will alter system set log archive to that. I would cancel that location so that I want to let DataGuard Broker manage that itself. So let's do this here first. We cancel that on the primary, and we cancel that on the standby. Let's exit out of this. Exit, clear screen, and then let's go back to DataGuard Broker. Now you can certainly connect like this, and then connect sys as sys DBA. I can just go ahead and connect DGMRL /, and I'm going to connect in there as sys DataGuard. So right now back here, I would rerun my command to add my database, my standby database right here. So that should work now. So the physical standby has been added. So if I show my configuration at this point, I should have a configuration prod standby DG. The prod is the primary primary database. The standby is the physical standby database. But again, still, my configuration is disabled. So so right now, I would enable my configuration. I would enable configuration. I give it a minute. And then I will check the status again of my configuration to see. Now, nice. So if we do show configuration at this point, there we go. So our configuration status updated 6 seconds ago is now success. So we've created a configuration and enabled that configuration, right? Let's see a little bit more. Show configuration. And if we use the verbose, we would see a little bit more about our configuration, right? So currently we have a prod and standby data guard, primary physical standby pair. And these are some of the configuration properties: fast start, failover, threshold, and things like that. Now let's take a look at the database. So show database, let's do prod. So it tells me prod is on, transport is on. Let's do a verbose here. So show database verbose prod. Verbose just gives you a little bit more details, right? So remember we talked about the log transport mode. We set it to async. Depending, again, like I said, if you change this, it kind of affects the data guard configuration, right? If it's max performance, max protection, or max availability, or something like that. So this is kind of, we will talk about this in later modules. All right. All right, so we enable configuration. We are saying, so we enable our database. Let's go ahead and enable database prod. Let's take a look at that. All right, let's show database verbose prod. So now we have a location also for our data guide, broker log. So transport is on. And then let's take a look at our standby database as well. Show database verbose. Let's not do verbose first. Let's just see standby. Show database standby. Now, usually from a quick perspective, this is where you would see if there is lag and how much that lag is. Currently, we are happy to report that we don't have any lag, but lag can come as a result of many things. Now, in my experience, for the most part, it's usually a network thing. But data guard, of course, is very powerful. It helps you apply all of that stuff. So let's look at show database verbose standby, just to see a little bit more juice. So clearly, guys, this is how you would set, you would configure your data guard within an environment. Now, of course, you want to test it first, make sure it's working before, of course, you deploy it, on a more mission critical scale. So thank you for watching the video. I'm sorry it ended up being this long, but I know you have learned something. And if you feel like you've learned something, go ahead, click on the like button, subscribe to the channel, enable notifications, and share. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.